What if we've been asking the wrong question? Not how do we fix our marriages, but what outdated human operating system do marriages exist to disrupt? Welcome to a conversation that doesn't repair cracks in love's facade, it detonates the entire foundation. Because today's most thriving couples aren't making it work, they're rewriting humanity's code for connection through radical candor, chaos engineering, and sacred insurgency. We're dissecting why monogany's extinction is inevitable unless we splice it with collaboration principles. How to turn routine fights into philosophical hackathons that birth societal patches. The taboo truth that attachment is colonialism's bedfellow, and how to decolonize desire. This isn't just a dialogue, it's a relational science fiction writing itself in real time. If you're ready to stop polishing the cage and melt its bars into something that dares the future to keep up, tune in, share your thoughts, and ask questions. Then go back and watch it again because I believe this episode will have something that will be beneficial to you and yours. So, as we're getting ready to get started, and again, by all means, this is we definitely invite you to ask questions and share your thoughts. I want to kind of pose a question, and this question it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It kind of goes back to the whole lateral thinking aspect. And the question that I really want to ask is, what if the highest purpose of marriage wasn't happily ever after? You guys know that. That's the fairy tale Walt Disneyism, right? What if the highest purpose of marriage wasn't happily ever after, but functioning as a co-evolutionary accelerator, a biohack that outpaces humanity's emotional operating system? So if that, any portion of that can be true, the question that I want to kind of throw out there is, how might we retrofit these partnerships from romantic nostalgia into relational research and development hubs that code societal progress in real time? The facial expressions.
Well, Coach, as you were, um, and I looked at the questions, and immediately it takes me back to Genesis. There's nothing written in Genesis or even in the Word where it promises a happily ever after. That was not God's intention for marriage. That is, I'll use one of your words, that's a fallacy and a fantasy that society has created to make us feel good about a responsibility. People don't look at marriage as a responsibility. They want to, and we're not saying that marriage should not be enjoyable. You shouldn't be happy. There shouldn't be those good moments. But if you're getting married predicated on those things, or even as you said, on the emotionalism that's been created around marriage, we definitely understand why, unfortunately, the divorce rate is as high as it is, even in the church realm. And I'll park there because I want to hear what the voice of reason got to share.
Let me unmute. I'm gonna have to, I must be honest. When I was looking at the questions, I was like, "This is interesting," and it, like you said, it just obliviates the whole concept of why we think we enter into marriage, right? For the happily ever after. And so when you go into a marriage with the mindset of R&D, right? You're going in there purpose. There's a purpose, right? There's intention. There's intentionality. There's thought. There's forethought. And so you're going in there not because it kind of reminded me a little bit of arranged marriages, right? You already know what your intent and the purpose is for your coming together, right? And so when you, not saying that that's something that we're going to do today, I want to make that clear, but it just reminded me of coming together and taking out all the fluff. When we were brought up, as Coach made mention to, there was the fairy tales, there was a princess, There was a sugar and spice and everything nice. And what was the boys? I forgot what the boy. What were the boys? And so there's this concept that we have adopted or that has been given to us coming up, and that we believe, and then we take that over into adulthood, and then we enter into a marriage and say this is how it's supposed to be because this is what I was told it was, this is what I see on TV, this is the framework from what was given to me, and this is how it's supposed to be. Nothing in those frameworks were designed or even written in biblical doctrine, but we make it up as we go along. And so I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's always a setup question, and I put it in there. Little boys with frogs and snails and puppy dog tails. So I love where you guys are going, because first I want to start with Nodella's statement. You kind of touched on the happily ever after, and you went into the emotionalism. And I know that as people are listening to this, it's not a very comforting conversation as we're starting to unravel this. So are you saying that I can't be happy in marriage? Like marriage isn't, and I'm playing advocate in this conversation. Are you saying that marriage isn't designed for me to be happy? Because Lisa touched on something as well. She made mention of, like, we have our intent, intent and purposes and things of that nature. So are you saying that I can't be married? I can't be happy in marriage, that marriage isn't designed for me to be happy?
No, not at all.
No, marriage is not designed for you to be happy. Why? You ought to be happy on your own before going into the marriage. That's what makes it a happy marriage. Because when things start going, let's say left, or when you come to life challenges, happiness goes away because you're like, okay, I got this situation right now and I'm not feeling happy about it. So does that mean you immediately go to divorce court? Absolutely not. So my take is the marriage is not what makes you happy, but you go into the marriage with your own. Each partner should be going into that marriage with their own happiness.
We can't hear you, Coach. Are you muted? You're muted.
My bad. I'm sorry. Before we go any further, Dr. Lisa, good to see you this morning, and welcome to this morning's
Sorry, I'm
conversation.
late.
Nope, you're fine. Don't feel pressured to rush in. We're just going to continue to unpacking this initially as we press forward. Lisa Keys, you mentioned arranged marriages, and I know we say we're not going back to that, right? But there was a point that you made as it pertains to arranged marriages. We knew what we were getting into at that point. We got, marriages was created for a particular purpose. Could you expound on that just a little bit, like if you don't mind?
Well, in then we talk about the dowry, and we talk about the families coming together. The children are raised up to know. Think about coming to America. I think that's what you can think. Come to America. So they were raised up to know exactly who that mate was, right? And that they were going to marry them. It wasn't about your feelings. It wasn't about your emotions. It was about, this is what we have already arranged for you. And if I looked at a documentary, and there's a lot of people who talked about coming up, and there were some older ladies, and they were like, well, initially, or men as well, I didn't quote unquote love, but we grew to respect each other and to care for each other and appreciate each other. And so love is not all about, I'm gonna get flowers or tell me you love me. That's not love. We understand what love is in our community because we talk about it all the time, because we're trying to break some of those notions or some of those programs that we grew up with, because God is love, and everything in him wants us to understand that when we come together, it's not because of something that we want, but we have to be intentional because we have purpose. And that purpose is to prove his will each and every day.
I like that. Dr. Lisa, you ready to kind of dive in just a little bit? And if you need more
Sure.
time,
This sounds like my kind of conversation. So
And so the question is, how might we retrofit these partnerships from romantic nostalgia into relational research and development hubs that code societal progress in real time?
ooh, okay. So when I came in, I heard Nodella sharing about how happiness is, you're supposed to have that. No one can bring that to you, which I absolutely agree with. I think that that's what happens with couples, is that we are looking for someone to fulfill these needs and these lacks, and so they complete you and that kind of stuff. And it really is kind of a personal work on self, and then you bring that self to a union with someone else, and you continue to work. So I mean, and I'm just speaking from experience, it's like you don't walk in knowing a whole lot of stuff, because now you're merging your personal self with someone else who's on a whole nother journey, and you might be close, but you might not be in the same space. So you have to learn how to balance and maneuver that. So I think that in partnerships, and I always say I'm just mushy, gushy, all that good stuff. But I do understand that that's just kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. And that the real work is in the difficult conversations, the challenging moments. All of that is where we need to build and communicate, and pour into ourselves more, as far as how to manage relationships, how to listen, how to all of those things that I think are like basic things, but I think we kind of skip over that stuff when we jump into relationships, and we forget all the basics. I don't know if that kind of gets in there, but yeah.
No, it does. It does. And I like what I'm hearing, because it kind of talks specifically about the romantic nostalgia aspect of it as well. And I always said, like, for our generation, Walt Disney did a very interesting, and I'm pinning them, but it's not just them; it's a number of different things. But we got the fairy tales, and we got the life happily ever after, and we got the person who started in the muck and the mire, and then they somehow elevated themselves through romantic connections to a place of prestige. You see it a lot during Christmas time, a lot. And so a lot of the Christmas aspects of it is wrapped in romanticism. And then therefore that becomes a thought that's in a person's head. And then in their mind, they're looking for that happily ever after. They're looking for their Prince Charming. They're looking for, their frog princess, or whatever that looks like, right? And I think all of those things brought forward into real time does not necessarily um, capture reality. And so, because we exist in a romantic existence, we fail to identify reality. And that separation between romanticism and reality creates frustration, turmoil, depression, all of those different things. We cycle in and out of relationship simply because we're looking for that perfection, according to how I see it, but yet necessarily realizing that that person is just as flawed as I am. And in all my flawedness, I'm still looking for perfection. So the romantic nostalgia is something that we have to learn to cast down early. But I like to move over into the relational research and development hubs, because I think this is a very interesting concept. And when you look at research and development, it is created so that we can, like, generate new ideas, new concepts, new perspective for future growth, or enhance the ones that currently exist. And so yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask a question. So I think I heard you say that romance is one of the romanticizing bring into the relationship is one of the things that can hurt the relationship greatly.
Sure.
Not necessarily cause divorce, but I don't want to go to that extreme. But it will make for a uncomfortable environment, because one person has an ideal of this is how it should be, and the other person has an ideal of this is what I grew up in, this is what I believe. I think to what Dr. Lisa was saying. And so now we have to merge together, and now we have to unpack and gel together, working to become one. But because of these conflicts or beliefs or adopted behaviors, we're now struggling in the relationship.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you said you had a question. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, I think you answered it initially.
Okay.
You did.
All right. Okay. And going back to the research and development hubs, I think, like, I guess let me just ask this, because if we understand that research and development is to discover new concepts, new products, and things of that nature, so that we can grow in the future or enhance the ones that we have for the sake of growth, what would happen if we take our relationships and make it a research and development hub? What would happen if we try new things for the sake of growth and development? What would happen if we try things and, how I do, according to the word, right? Take a chance on ourselves and see what happens, as long as it lines up with his word. What do you think in your mind? How would that help relationships going forward?
It would grow tremendously. I mean, I see all good things from that. I just think that you say it so wonderfully. The way you put it together, I think people just kind of go through it and then realize, like I'm realizing now, but we're, 35 years in of knowing each other and almost 15 years of marriage. And we're still learning things, but we've actually come into that kind of relationship where now even what we kind of deemed as romance is not the same. Things that other people would look at and be like, that, what is that? But it's the I don't know how to explain it or put it into words, but it's moments where I hear that we used to criticize if you're in the same room and you're on your phone, he's on his phone, that somehow you're not really connected, you're not, but there is some kind of feeling that I can't explain where we can be in the same room, in the same space, doing something different, but there's a connection. And I think that's, to me, kind of what you're getting to. I don't know how to put it into words, I'm being honest, but it's some kind of connection where it's just not as simple as he's on his phone, so he's not paying no attention to you. That's not what this is. It's like I said, y'all might have to help me. I don't know how to put it into words, but there's some kind of connection that's being made with no words. We're not gazing into each other's eyes. There's just something going on that gives you a sense of, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what he meant for me. And, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's not romance. It's something else.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I don't know.
So one of the things that, as Dr. Lisa was talking, that I'm reminded of, and we've, talked about before, is that, first of all, when you first met, let's say you was 20 years old, and here you get married at 25 and it's 10 years later, you cannot expect, or I don't know why anyone would either expect or want to remain the same 10 years later. I don't know anybody who would really want to do that, because simply as the beings we are, created by the Creator himself, listen to the words that I'm using. We are created beings by a Creator who is creative. We really have no other choice but to evolve. However, we can stunt that, because, as I said, we can choose. I don't want to, there's some people who have been wearing the same hairstyle their entire life, and that's their choice, right? But for me, as y'all see every week, you don't know what kind of hairstyle I may come with. I like wearing different hairstyles. And so we must keep in mind that as human beings, we naturally evolve. Some of us are consciously evolving, intentionally evolving, and others are unconsciously evolving. And why I say unconsciously is that because you're still in an environment that or a society that has not stopped, simply because you don't want to evolve. Society is still going to keep moving, and whether you go with or against it is on you. but you may not realize that there are things you're being exposed to, you're just not aware of them. And so for me is that we need to recognize that what you liked when you first got married, more than likely there are one or two things or maybe five things that you're not gonna like 10 years later. And Dr. Lisa, if I could share, and I know exactly what you're saying is that being in the same room, and just because you're not all cuddling, you're not watching TV together or holding a conversation, I think it's a sense of the fact that you are in the same room. You're like, okay, it's like a safety zone for you because you're in that room. And to me, that is a form of I don't even want to say romantic. I'm going to say the word that comes to mind is intimacy. And those who understand what real intimacy is, it's not all about that touchy stuff. Intimacy can be one of the simplest acts. And so that's what I see with you. And so we just have to be mindful that in the space of research and development, that if you want, not even, I know we're focusing on marriage, but I just want to broaden it for a moment. For any relationship, you're going to have to do that R&D if you care for that relationship and if you want it to work out. That includes family, that includes friends, that includes even colleagues, and they all have their own depth as to how much R&D you want to apply to that. But I say that R&D definitely is needed if you want that relationship to last.
Absolutely. I love it. I welcome it. I think what Nodella was sharing and Coach, you shared, at Lisa too, that all of these things that we learn along the way to, grow. And I don't even know if it's consciously trying to grow together, but just trying to be a better person. And that's what happens. I think, you just start to grow as a person, and then you introduce new things into your marriage, whether it's, prayer in the morning or whatever the change may be. And you start to you can feel it when, okay, this is the direction I'm supposed to be going in. And it's not necessarily that I'm going to him and saying, hey, we're going to do this next, and this is the next step. That is not that structured. It's just that you start to kind of, follow your assignments and hear your downloads. Personally, he gets his way, but we have conversations, but we don't force them. I think that when you first get into these relationships, you're trying to make them mimic something that you've seen that worked or looked good. And then you get into it, which I think, you have to accept the fact that, oh, this ain't that. But when you go in, you think you have an idea. Because I know I did. I had an idea, and it was all, flowers and beautiful, and everybody's going to listen and understand, and love is in the air. And I was, quickly, it was like, no, this is real. There's nothing wrong with working at it, but, it's different than what you think it is, and it's okay. But I think people tend to fight for that thing. Like, if it's not that, then it's not real. If it's not that, then it's not love. And that's where we kind of mess up and get misdirected.
So I like that. If I don't see it the way that I see it in my mind, then it's not real, basically. So what I did, because I wanted to see what the corporate concept was for R&D, and I wanted to compare it to relationships, since we're talking about restructuring, right? And so, and just reframing the way that we enter into these relationships. So when I looked it up, research and development hubs, they're collaborative. So you're collaborating together, and you're in an environment where you're focusing on advancing, you're focusing on knowledge, you're focusing on understanding, right? And then there's a few terms that stuck out, and it was collaboration. That's teams coming together. And I'm going to use the not the biblical, the business terms, because when you use them, you can see how they can be employed in marriage. And so that's what I saw as I was reading it. And that was like resources. So the R&D hubs provide access to specialized equipment, laboratories, and other necessary resources for research and testing. So I began to think, how can I employ this in the mindset of reframing and entering into a marriage or relationship, as Ms. Nodella was stating, networking together, coming together to network. Innovation and focus. Primary goal is to develop new ideals, products, or processes that can be brought to, in this term, the market. In other words, the relationship. And so coming together to constantly grow and work on developing and having a structured idea of how we are going to enter into this, right? And it does not, when I first began to do my research and development on these questions, I had to really take my time, because I said it seems so sterile. Women, we are thinking about romance, right? And so where is that at? Why is this has to be so structured? But then as I began to continue to study and then compared it to what the Word of God is saying, I was like, well, this has some concepts and ideals and instructions that were given to us as believers, right? We need to come together. Our purpose is to focus on God. And so it says the research agility, research and development hubs are designed to be flexible, allowing teams to adapt quickly based on findings in the market and the needs and I put beliefs, because I was trying to make sure that I am comparing these concepts to what we are thinking as marriages. And when I began to look at it, I was like, it helps both parties in any relationship, friendship, marriage. It gives us a clear, definitive idea of the purpose that we're coming together. And it does not leave out anything else. But it helps us to have an ideal, because like so many of us said, I think Dr. Lisa said, I came into it and I was trying to, I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm developing, right? Well, I'm trying to be a better person. Well, in this concept, we're coming together. We have an idea of, we have a little idea about our identity already, right? Before, when we entered into a relationship, I'm not going to say overall make a sweeping assumption, but a statement. But we entered in and we didn't really truly know our identity. But now we have some ideals of how we're going to move forward and how this is going to work out. And we have some forethought, we have some projection, and it gives an idea. We're not just entering into it haphazardly. So that's my response.
Well, and can I add, so, because I kept wanting to go back to that comment that James made. So in layman's terms too, I love that you put it that way, because we get to define what that lab looks like that you mentioned. And it's the car where you're driving and enjoying silence together or listening to music. And, we don't have to be in conversation all the time. And so I thought when you said lab and getting in, and it's funny because that's my moment to sometimes have conversations, because, I kind of viewed it as we're kind of stuck in here together. Like, you got to drive and I got to ride, so let's talk. But we had some really deep conversations from just being in that space where it is just your world for that moment. And you can have some of those, conversations that outside of the lab, there's other people, there's other noise, this is not the right time. So we can translate all of that into layman's terms into and your relationship is your relationship. So a lot of times people are trying to, they have this checklist, or you say, oh no, that's not right, because you're not supposed to do that or whatever, but it's yours. So you all together decide how this moves. And it doesn't mean, okay, you got to take TV out the bedroom, or you got to do this. And, there's all these rules and things. And I think that's what makes it hard, because you're trying to meet up to expectations. And sometimes I'm like, well, who told you that? Like,
I don't like TVs in the bedroom. Coach, when I'm going to sleep. Go ahead, Nadal. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say quickly to piggyback off of what Dr. Lisa said is that one of the pitfalls that we are seeing today now more than ever is that everyone is trying to clone their relationships, their marriages after this person or that person. Most of the time it's based off of celebrities. But going back to what has already been said is that we have to find out what works for each other. So Coach just said no TV in the bedroom, but those are things that should be discussed before you even move into marriage to make sure that, okay, can't. And so this is the question that I ask myself when a guy thinks he's interested in me, and I say it like that on purpose. When a guy thinks he's interested in me, and, I began to have conversations with him and I see the, little flaws, character flaws or whatever. The first question I ask myself is this something or are those some things that I can live with for the entirety of the marriage for the rest of our life? This is the question that I ask. And I think this is a question that everybody needs to begin to ask themselves. Okay, so I see he chews with his mouth open. Is that really annoying? Do I want to deal with that for the next 35, 40, 80 years? Okay, she snores. Can I deal with that for the next 30, 45, 80 years? And going back to removing the romanticism and also fantasizing. A lot of people fantasize about being married and that, oh, it's going to be so wonderful and splendid. There are a very small number of marriages that actually fit that criteria. How and why? Because they met a person who believed exactly the same as they do. That's the only way that can work. But most of us, we are meeting people who are truly the opposite of who we are. And so we have to factor in, is that something that I can live with for the rest of our life, for as long as we're married? And that will help better, hopefully, if you're honest with yourself. And as we're talking about, get out of the emotions and stop, having your googly eyes, constantly going, oh, he is so fine, girl. Oh, man, she is hot. Okay, but what about when she starts snoring? Or what about when he starts snoring? Or what about if he's not as clean as you are? I am a very organized person, and that even comes to my clothing when I hang it up. And I'm going to turn it over to Coach. If you go in my closet right now, you will see a closet that is not like at least 90% of the population. I don't just throw my clothes in the closet. My clothes are hanging according to color, fabric, and then whether it's long sleeve or short sleeve. If it's a two-piece, single piece, I'm just saying. So a man needs to be able to deal with that. If he wants to be married to me, these are one of my little things. That's how I keep my closet. My shoes are in the closet according to color, height, and season. That's how that's how I am. So
we got you, sis. We love you too. But that man gonna have to have his own separate closet, his own separate room. Ain't no man gonna do that. No, we don't listen. We done left the research and development lab. So let's go back to R&D real quick. Good man. I wanted to ask this question because I think it's important, because I know it can be challenging to think laterally. We're conditioned to be linear thinkers. But when you're asked to think laterally, it's like, how do they connect? And I like what the voice of reason said. She went back and she focused on the business terms, and then she realized how they connected with the word of God. But one of the things I really wanted to touch on is what Sister Nodella said earlier. We were created by a creator, and that creator himself is creative. And when you first meet people, they tell you the most important things about themselves, generally in their mind. And so the first thing the creator told us about himself is that he is creative. In the beginning, God created. So if he is created, if the creator himself is creative, then you can assume that he created you to be creative. Well, why can I say that? Because if you continue reading down, he actually told you to create.
Mhm.
So in the space of relationship, I want us to kind of unpack like what are some things that can be done from a research and development perspective to enhance relationships. And before you guys dive in, I want to give you a couple of examples. Dr. Lisa, you pointed out James' example earlier. And then there was another example by his divine appointment about going to like TED Talks and um, I can't remember what the other one she said. I'm still looking for it. TED Talks and something. And I like the fact that she said that because in the midst of that, there we go, seminars and TED Talks.
Mhm.
I like the reason she said, I like the fact that she said that because TED Talks and seminars can give us some ideas, right? It can help us to consider things that we would not have known ordinarily thought. And we can actually either go there or watch them on YouTube together. And then afterwards share our perspectives, our point of view. What do we get from them? How can we employ some of these techniques in our relationship? So what I want to do is go back and let you guys give us share some examples, either practice or one you're thinking of right now. Like, what are some things that we can do from an R&D perspective to enhance relationships?
Well, I can share that we've done that. I may see something that's very informational about just communication or marriages or an older couple who's giving some advice or tips and things like that. And I might say, ask my husband to check it out, take a look at it because I don't want to guide what you think about, but check it out. Another thing we do is sometimes I find these creative cards. And we'll have moments where we sit down and we're asking. It seems like it's simple because you've known each other for so long, but it's like hey, tell me your whatever, and we have these conversations, and it just kind of ignites research on who we are now, because like you said, we're not the same person we were even yesterday, and milestones are hitting us all the time. So research to me is those check-ins. How are you feeling with, I mean, just with life and what's going on. So those are the kind of things that I can suggest, little card games, watching the TED Talks and webinars. Absolutely. I've shared some things, and what I found is that I'm more of that person. But the more that I say, hey, go check this out, he'll do it on his own time. But then he'll come back and say, I saw something. What do you think about this? Or now that we have social media, he'll share it to me. And I'm like, wow, it's not something that he would have even thought about doing before. But I think those are some of the things that we're doing in that research and development kind of thing, which I love. It's a great space to be in a relationship, actually.
Well, I thought about the some of the things, when I think about the webinars and the TED Talks, the documentaries that we can, watch, or even volunteering together. I think that when you have those conversations and you look at you begin to look at, go to the TED Talks or go to the webinars or look at the documentaries, and you share your thoughts on it, it helps give you some insight to the individual, how they're thinking, what they're thinking, and it helps you guys to, come together and I don't want to say collaborate, but I think that's exactly what you're doing in coming to an understanding about ideals. And so I think these participating in these types of different events help you to actually learn about more about you as well, because both of you guys are learning together, and we all have blind spots, so we help each other, when we have those blind spots. So when we come together and we begin to learn and participate in these events, it helps us to get an idea of how that individual is thinking. Even, this is not just for relationships, I mean for marriages, but for any relationship that you have. So I think participating in these different aspects, community service, volunteering for um, um, just different things that will benefit the community, and it helps you to get an idea of each other, and that's how you're continuing to grow. Like Dr. Lisa was saying, when she said check in, I had written it down right before she said it, because that is what we have to do, because we're not the same. We're growing all the time. We're being exposed to new information, new ideals come to us. Even the Holy Spirit is teaching us, even in those moments, as I was doing my preparing for the show, the Holy Spirit is teaching me, giving you ideas. And the question came to me as I'm looking over this research and development is, who instituted marriage? And so I'll leave that for another time, but that's one of the questions that came to me. And so I had to go and begin to dig in that. And of course we know the answer to it, but I wanted a little bit more definitive, answers about some questions that I had. So I found them in the Word of God. And so those things help us, even reading the Word, sitting down together, reading the Bible. I mean, that is where I get a lot of my greatest understanding from. And from there, it goes across every other personal development, professional development. So it helps me across the board. And I can filter them through the Word of God, because I can see the resemblance.
I'm glad you mentioned that, with because what I did find myself doing is certain Bible stories, marriages within the Bible, and things that they did. You never even talk about them that much, but I actually looked into that, and as an example, I wanted to share that in research and development, what I did was start to attend events where what I tend to see is that some people actually want to go to an event where it addresses the men and the women, so that we can say, well, you do this too and you do this too. But I had a friend of mine, Dr. Gail, who actually had an event, and it was specifically for the women and for wives, because we tend to want to talk about what they do that makes us do this. And her whole angle is, it was like a check for me. Like, okay, I'm not addressing him. I'm addressing, how is Lisa showing up in the marriage? What are some things that I can do better? And I like the fact that it focused on what I do as opposed to what we do sometimes, because sometimes we're not dealing with our own stuff because we're trying to collectively do this. And you can always do tit for tat all day long. So, it's kind of like, go to, research and development for me was to figure out what Lisa's doing, how Lisa's showing up. And then from there, we can collaborate. But I got to check myself first, because I can't walk into the room or come from an event and say, you know what, I can't do that. I needed something that when I got back home, I approached this better than I did previously before I went to that event. And that's an every year thing. I think consistency is also the key. We do it one year or one time, and then we sit down and think we got all the answers. No, you need to go back for a refresher quite often. We need to keep pouring in. Yeah.
So my response is, I have two responses. Is one, if you've met a couple that is where you are, I think having a couples dinner, just, having a nice dinner and having that organic conversation. We're talking about mature people here. We're not talking about, people who are chaotic, but we're talking about mature people. And again, that the commonality is that you're in the same space, and how they're handling it in their space versus how you're handling it, those can be, that can be beneficial. But then also talking to the older generation, because we recognize they came up in a much simpler time, and so they didn't have as much to contend with. They still may have had, some family members that meddled, here and there, but they dealt with it. It didn't fester away. Today, we have family members, unfortunately, that's too much into other family members' marriages. So I think sitting down also with a seasoned couple, And I know that was something that I did when I was married years ago, but we recognize that both of you have to be on the same page. It can't just be about you. So that's kind of, what I would share in terms of R&D of, things that you can do, but certainly always, as the voice of reason said, the word of God is beats all, that it gives us the ultimate direction, that we could possibly need.
I love that. I do like the fact that you made mention of the older generation, because one of the things that was like very memorable for me is the way that we sat around and played games. And we played a lot of board games when I was younger, because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, all we had was each other. And I think when we find a way to bring that into like our current situation, well, before so, I think that was important because it included the adults. It didn't exclude the adults. So the adults played with the kids and playing board games. And like we remember the time when aunties and uncles and things of that nature made a fool of themselves for the sake of the gamism, right? That was funny. That was memorable. We talked about that. I think the same thing can happen today. So I kind of want to like share something. I do couples coaching, whether marriage or premarital, and I have these cards, and I purchased them, but you don't have to buy any. You can create your own. And so it's that big. I don't know if you guys can see that. Nope, the glare. There we go. So it says, in an ideal world, what would we be doing more of? And so now that card by itself makes both people Imagineer. But here's the deal: if I'm asking a question, I can't answer the question. You have to answer the question. And whatever your answer is, it's the right answer. There is no right or wrong. So now what I'm doing now is I am getting your input on what you imagine your future being like. Now, there's pros and cons to that, but I think the most important thing is the pros greatly outweighs the con. The con is that, well, you can see where your ideas are different for the future. But the pro is it like, how can I incorporate your idea into the future? So it's like, it's not something that you use to find fault. It's something that you use to have fun, play games, so forth and so on. You can even spruce it up a little bit, right? Let's just say one day she gets home from work or he gets home from work, and you've already pre-planned what the game is like. And so now you can do this as a scavenger hunt. So you find this card, and then you answer the question. Then you got to open this envelope and you read what's in that envelope. Then you got to go to this location of the house and you find the next card. Like, it's as creative as you want it to be. But I think the key here, and I want to find it because I put it in the chat, because I wanted everybody to understand something that I said, which I think is very key. And that's this: romance is defined as a feeling of excitement and mystery associated with love. A lot of times we skip over the excitement and the mystery. The mystery is key because it keeps you anxious to understand, well, what's she going to do when I get home from work now? What's he going to do when I get, it's Saturday. We normally do something different on a Saturday because we don't have to worry about work. Like, you can create fun within your relational space by simply avoiding to not do the same things that you do every day, day in, day out, day in, day out. That becomes monotonous, that becomes boring, and at a certain point in time, you just get flat in your relationship. So I just wanted to use that as an example because I have several. I have a few. Like, this one is based upon the family, right? So the questions in here incorporate the entire family. So now you get to play teams. I don't know if you guys remember during COVID, there was this game that was very popular. I can't remember the name of it now. It's like one person would pick a card, and it's like you just start. You couldn't say the word, but you had to say something to describe it, and they had to figure out what it is. It's another form of Pictionary without the picture.
Taboo.
No, it wasn't Taboo. It was made by a black company.
Okay.
Charades.
It's no. When it comes to me, or somebody gonna put it in the chat, I know because somebody else know what I'm talking about. But it was on a yellow thing, and it was made by a black company. It was very popular during COVID-19. You can do that as a family. COVID-19 created a lot of things that we could do as a family that did not involve going outside the house and going to get a passport and traveling to another country, which we believe that those are the memories that we should be creating. I think the memories that we create comes from the research and development that we can do together. We can even sit down and talk about planning what we're going to do on Saturday. Like what research and development. We can even call it that. What R&D technique we're going to do on Saturday, right? So it's a number of things that we can do together. But I just wanted to use that as an example because this is an example that I know that works, and I use it all the time for couples, and they discover something new about themselves every time I use it. So that's just my example I want to share with everybody. But if you guys can remember that game, please put in the chat because I can't, for whatever reason, it's just not coming back to me. Um, but it's really good. I want to skip, if you guys don't mind, because I thought the research and development phase of a conversation was really good. And I say, like Donald Trump said, it's really, really good. And so I want to go into engineering vulnerability with code-like precision. No, it's not date night. It's I'm trust me, we're gonna figure this out within the next 30 minutes. Um, but engineering vulnerability with code-like precision. Now, I think this is interesting because intimacy isn't magic; it's beckoned by engineering. It's almost like a thing that we have to create within the foundations of our relational space. We have to ensure it's there, but we also have to protect it as well. And I think that within itself helps us to get to the point of standardizing vulnerability protocols. So that being said, I don't want to just dive into it because some people are like, well, what is a vulnerability protocol? A vulnerability protocol is a thing that is it is a process or procedure that is created within your computer, and what it does is it assesses. I'm gonna miss some of them. It identifies, it assesses, and it also identify, assess, and one more to where whatever type of potential attack can come against it, right? It protects it. So that's kind of like what a vulnerability protocol is, right? You can Google it; it's right there. It'll be clear and simple for you. Again, it assesses, it identifies and assess any potential threat that comes against your computer system, your software, or whatever the case may be, for the sake of protecting it. So, how would standardizing vulnerability protocols disrupt industries like therapy, self help, or social media, which often profit from emotional ambiguity and dysfunction? In other words, if you can do it for yourself, how would it disrupt them?
Put them out of business. I'm just saying.
Right, that part.
It could. This question was really, really intriguing to me because I thought about how emotions are used to manipulate, and we thrive in this dysfunctional environment and people do it for profit. And so if we're mindful that this is what's going on, and we're mindful that this is what's going on, then we can make some better decisions, right? Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. That's the game. That's the game. I couldn't remember the name of it.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Oh, Culture Days.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. But I'll let someone else respond.
So if I'm understanding, if I'm understanding, the question is, how would standardizing vulnerability protocols disrupt industries? I think for us, we first and foremost need to identify what that vulnerability is. If we don't know what that vulnerability is, that's like your enemy knowing you better than you. And so we need to know first and foremost what vulnerability or vulnerabilities we have in order to know that they exist, to know that we need to protect ourselves against, even as you said, the industries out here that's capitalizing on that. We also, as believers, we need to be careful that we don't use those vulnerabilities to play the victim, because that is a trap, to always want to garner sympathy or use it as to be an attention seeker. We have to be careful when it comes to our vulnerabilities. I know for me, I am very protective, and there is a handful of people who know certain vulnerabilities that I have, and that's because I knew I could trust them with it, and that they would not turn around, as the remainder of the question poses, is that they use it against me. So we also need to be wise about who we share our vulnerabilities with, even in the space of you're in a relationship with someone, and that will hopefully eventually lead to marriage. You have to know the right time also when to share that vulnerability, because still not knowing that person, you don't know how their response may be. So for me, hopefully I'm answering the question enough, but maybe, as others share, we will also get a little more clarification on, what are some best practices regarding standardizing vulnerability protocols. But for me, I don't share that with everybody, or I don't make it known, because sometimes we can make it known and we don't even realize that we've made it known to other people. And again, there comes that exploitation of that thing. So that protocol, that protection piece is very important.
Well, let me inject for a second, because I think I may have pushed you guys out on the ledge without giving you a parachute. I do apologize. And so remember, we're looking to protect the relationship. I'm not looking to protect myself. I will start there. So it's like considering if then statements. So if this happens, then that, right? So let me change, let me change the perspective for a second. And so, in the realm of our relationship, we would create like if then scenarios for like a standardized vulnerability protocol. And so, if this happens, then our response is that, and that response should prevent this thing from disrupting our relationship, from taking away the intimacy within the scope of our relationship. And each person, we should have if then statements as well, right? We should automatically have in our mind, like, this is how I protect my internal peace. This is how I do not allow the attack from the enemy to sever my relationship with the Father. And so within the space of relationship, we jointly do the same thing. We create these standardized vulnerability protocols to protect what we have created, what we're trying to create, and then that maintains the harmony and we strengthen in our faith. So let's change the dynamics. And I do apologize. What are some standardized vulnerability protocols that we can implement to ensure we aren't subject to attacks from anything that disrupts harmony? And I spelled harmony wrong. Don't judge me.
Well, I would actually, because I was gonna. So my answer to the first question, and I'm gonna flow into this, was, and I think it actually combines what Nodella shared and you shared, in that control was the first way you asked that. I would have said how it disrupts is it takes the control out of the people outside of the home and puts it in the home. And how that's done is, for example, if there's and I'm just giving an example, if there's a disagreement or something happens that upsets somebody, the rule, I'm saying rule, but the standard is come to me first. Let's have the conversation, like rule of house. You come to each other first. Let's have a discussion before you go and call mama, sister, brother, cousin, mother, whatever. So that would be like a standard that we put in place to keep it in house so that the control stays in the home before we pushing it out the door, because then that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation. Somebody's got their input in it. So that would be an example. But the first question would have been that it disrupts by taking the control out of their hands and claiming that for yourselves as a couple. That's how I would blend those. Because I was like, don't let me forget it, because I'm getting older. I was going to say, so it takes, which is a good thing, take the control out of their hands so that you can use that as enhancer or, kind of touch base, but you really do have your own, you have your own thing, and you might need touch points from other things outside, but generally speaking, you have your own kind of setup. This is what, and then we check each other. If I run to mama, it's like, I thought we said we were gonna, and then I have to claim that and say, you know what, I stepped outside. Yes, let's bring that back in. So that's kind of what I'm thinking would be like an example.
Okay, I like that. Let me put the other question back up. I'm sorry. Dr. Lisa, it's almost covering you. That's why I keep taking it up and putting it down.
Oh, no worries.
I think another standardized vulnerability protocol is if you're always honest with each other, when people come to you with stuff saying, oh, I saw your husband, at happy hour and this girl was up in his face. Well, if you have this honesty protocol, whereas when we get into these marriages, it shouldn't be, we can't ever talk to the opposite sex again. That's just not realistic. Having that trust and honesty, let me just say it this way, having trust and honesty will take that away. Now, do I want my husband to always come home and tell me, yeah, this girl was pushing up on me? Absolutely not, because that's going to actually, I think, create that opening. It will open the door for you to start doubting, well, if all these women coming up to you every time you leave the house, then what are you doing that all these women, you're opening or you're creating a situation unnecessarily. I just think that whenever we both leave the house, we know who we are to each other. And when you have that trust, that honesty, and let me add a third word, and respect, I think that these disruptors will be minimalized. And going back to what Dr. Lisa said, is that you actually maintain control of your relationship. And so that anytime anything does attempt to try to infiltrate the relationship, you have that control and you can, just dismiss it. If you feel the need to want to talk about it, that's fine. But if you don't, I would say, why, again, create an issue unnecessarily that even doesn't necessarily exist? And I hope my answer was a little better based on your redefining the question.
Yep, your answer was good. And that wasn't your fault. That was my fault. So thank you for that.
Okay, I think some of the things that we can implement into these protocols that can help will be, I think one Dr. Lisa mentioned already, checking in. The other one is, we can have, you mentioned you do premarital counseling and counseling for marriages. For I think you said just marriages, I'm not sure. But for you to talk to someone, if you need to, to make sure you guys are staying strong together in your relationship and you're on one accord. I think that's important, and that's something you can implement so that you won't be attacked from. And another thing would be not listening to, I think Dr. Lisa mentioned it, to outside voices, right? Or either Miss Nodell, I can't remember which one mentioned it, to outside voices. And when you guys are talking and you're strengthening each other and your relationship is growing, you have an ideal of what your mate will do or won't do, right? You have a semblance of an ideal. And so I think that it's important for you, if someone brings something to you, just first of all, not receive it. and then make sure you, because you have an idea of who that person is in your life. And I think those things are important. Being sure in your relationship, not saying that people aren't subject to error. I'm not saying that, but you do have an ideal. You can't have the conversation because you're continuing to strengthen your relationship by communicating. And so I think those things are important when these outside attacks may come. So that would be one aspect of it.
I love your responses, and I'm gonna take both of these down as I prepare my response. I think it's a couple of things that we have to understand, and I want to um, make it make sense. Whatever because remember we talked about the creator. The creator is creative, so he created me to create. Whatever he instructed me to do, he instructed we to do. I will start there. So when I start talking about we, I do not remove his instructions from the we. I must keep his instructions the same. And I like to start off by saying we take joy in tribulation, understanding that tribulation worketh patience. So number one, every relationships need to have a patience reserve. What does that mean? That means that we're storing up, right? That's what all of the interaction, the intimacy is all about. We're putting money in our patience bank so that when it's needed, it can be drawn from. And when we hit said tribulation, we're not, paying for the tribulation out of our daily functioning, portions of the money. That's one way of looking at it. That's the first way I look at it. So a lot of the things that we do every day adds to our patience reserve. That's number one. Number two, the boundaries that I have set for me, I automatically assume them for you. And hopefully, the boundaries that you have set for you, you automatically assume them for me, because the first attack is never external. The first attack is always internal. You would challenge me, or I would challenge you to such a degree that we'll destroy our own relationship before the enemy even lifts a finger. So let's start there. Let's protect ourselves from ourselves and recognize that we're not individuals on this journey. We're trying to come together to do this as one. And the way that we do this is we automatically give each other the necessary level of understanding that we expect the other one to give to us. So that still is a part of adding to my patience reserve. Okay. Now, there are certain protocols that we got to put into place in dealing with the outside. And again, at whatever boundary I have for you, whatever boundary I have in my life, I automatically attribute to you, and vice versa. Therefore, whatever boundaries we have for us, we automatically attribute to them, not just people, stuff, things, whatever. Okay. So if at the end of the day, when I consider those boundaries that we actually have and we automatically attribute them to each other, we collectively will never violate anyone else. I will start there. We will never violate anyone else. We will never speak ill will of anyone else. We will never put anyone else in a compromising situation. In turn, we do not collaborate with people who would do the same thing. Why? Because that is protecting us from future issues. I don't care what kind of car they got. I don't care what kind of house they got. I don't care what kind of job they got. None of that stuff matters. All of that stuff is all just societal focus anyway. Societal distractions. Now we're getting somewhere. Distractions are things that we have to work out, because the distraction that's outside of me is not the problem. It is the fact that the distractor is inside of me. So I have to work on the distractor inside of me so that the distraction never happens. Why did that catch my attention when it walked past? Because there was something in me that drew that said, hey, there it is. Right. So what's the thing inside of me that makes me make that distractor a distraction? That's internal work that we have to do. Both of us got it. When we believe I got it, or just one sex, we're only kidding ourselves. We're both lying. Stop playing. Cut it out. Some of us are just better at masking it than others. So let's just be completely transparent. Everybody have distractors, and they come out in different shapes, formats. So we have to address those things openly and honestly. So again, we're still adding to the patient's reserve. Now, we continue along, and thank you, Adrian Artist, for putting that in there, because the next phase is understanding. So why is that important? Because that understanding helps. Well, wait, my bad. I thought you were quoting scripture. We take joy in tribulation, understanding that tribulation worketh patience, patience experience. I'm sorry. So it's the experience. So now we develop the experience in responding to external attack. I'm not saying that your response wasn't good, Adrian. I'm sorry. I just thought you were giving me the scripture. So now we have the experience to deal with the attacks that are coming up, and we know that's the key. We know that our security, that our vulnerability protocols work. That is important because now that allows us to exercise faith along this process. You know, experience hope, right? So take joy in tribulation, understand that tribulation work in patience, patience experience, and experience hope. That's why the faith part is important, because relationships are rooted in the future of his promises. So it requires the faith that we need in order to take that hope and pull it closer to us. So it's the faith in there. That's why the experience is important. So now those vulnerability protocols that we set up in our relationship for ourselves allow us to respond to anything that attacks us, whether internally or externally, to disrupt harmony, because we have now gotten to the point of exercising patience, experience, and hope. And in between that experience is hope is the requirement of faith, and that faith keeps us focused on the future. So what is happening in the here and now isn't a distractor. I said a lot, and I do apologize. What are you guys' thoughts on all of that?
No, I was gonna first of all, I'm just side note, but still related, is I think premarital counseling should be a must. It really helped. I think it would help any relationship. But that being said, some of the things that you say, I absolutely agree. I think that I really couldn't say it. You said a lot, but it all made sense. So I mean, I can't say it any better. I mean, that was the only way I know to get all of that in and say it, but it was the nail on the head. It was, yeah. I don't have anything else to add to that, but I absolutely agree. And I shared the premarital counseling because that's where I got all of that, because there were, there can be situations that you're dealing with, and simultaneously I had to figure out, okay, so why is this triggering me? But I also had to have the conversation. We had to collectively have the conversation. You know how I feel about this. I know how you feel about this. So when we see it, this is what we're going to do to address it so that we stay, so that it doesn't work. Because, the enemy wants us to just get in the battle right behind it. And it was working that way until we were like, okay, so now when we identify this, although it was very difficult, it was like, this is the plan on how we address this issue so that we walk away from this table and we're good. So, it still happened, but we're good because we now have a plan. So I love everything you said. Yeah. You on mute.
So,
but I hear you.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So when we think about the vows that the typical vows that are exchanged during a wedding ceremony, it talks about him and her, not anything or anybody else. It talks about him and her, their commitment to each other. I think a lot of people, going back to that emotional part, they're just so caught up in the moment. And again, we're not saying don't be happy, don't be joyous and all that stuff, for the occasion. But we cannot overlook that once you exchange those vows, the work does not begin. A lot of people say, oh, that's when the real work begins. No. To Dr. Lisa's point, and to what even Coach says, if you go into premarital counseling, you've already started the work. after the exchange of the vows, you just continue the work. Now it does look a little different because now you are on a path, not as one, as we discovered last, or maybe a month or two ago, that Holy Spirit revealed to us. He says, and the two shall become one. He didn't say that you are one. The two shall become one. So now your path looks a little different, in that now you're focusing a little more on us becoming that one. And so when we understand, and I know, and I feel myself going there to the voice of reason, when we understand what marriage is, what its true purpose is, but we can go back again, even though in the Old Testament, it doesn't use the word marriage. It talks more about a covenant. And perhaps, I don't know if this can be another topic in the future, distinguishing if there's a difference between the word marriage and the word covenant, because God used the word covenant. Man came up with the word marriage. And that possibly could be or play a role into some of the lack of communication of when we recognize or understand what a real covenant is. But just to sum up my response is that we just have to remember that as we are working on becoming one, that we should never look at each other as the other's enemy because we have a disagreement. That's another doorway or a gateway into creating a vulnerability that doesn't necessarily have to exist. I believe sometimes we open the doorway, or we create opportunities for something to come in and create a vulnerability that never existed, or try to exploit one that does exist. So again, hopefully my response makes sense.
I think from what you...
Oh, sorry, I thought I came off of mute. I was just saying, Coach, yes, I did also get what you were saying. I did not try to repeat it, but I understood what you were saying, like Dr. Lisa also.
I think one of the things that stuck out, and I'm so thankful to have this conversation, because it helps us to reconsider the way that if we go back and do examine where the current state of marriage is and being together and successful, we'll see that there's something that we need to work on. And so I thought about the thing that stuck out to me when Coach was talking about us being the first attack that comes from within the marriage, right? The individuals who are a part of the marriage. So I think that work is important, especially if you're just entering into a relationship. It's important that you guys are being authentic and transparent with each other, so that you don't give the enemy any room to come in and to cause confusion. And then if he does, sit down and just have that conversation. Because God wants us to grow and continue to be stronger in Him. That's His purpose for us coming together, so we continue to prove His will. And so I think that is one of the most important aspects of us coming together. First of all, to prove His will, but to make sure that we're healthy in our mind, and we understand moving forward. We have to think toward the future, because God is a God of growth. He wants us to grow in everything that we do. And so I think that just being mindful of that, and knowing that this is a journey, and we are going to grow in this journey. We are going to change, and we are going to become more aware. He's going to continue to teach us. Those things are important because we have to think about them. And then when they present themselves, we know how to sit down and have a conversation about them.
Yeah, because I believe that it should be that if my husband goes somewhere and I'm not with him, vice versa, when I'm out hanging with whoever, my girlfriends or the kids alone, whatever it is, that it's no difference. Like, you wouldn't say something, to him, because I'm not in the room, and somebody wouldn't say something to me because he's, what I'm saying? Like, when you see me, you see him. When you see him, you see me. So you shouldn't feel comfortable. And that's what that bond is all about, is that, when you come to me, you're not thinking, oh, well, he ain't here, so girl, we can do that. No, it's not that kind of party. And vice versa. And that's what we have to, that's what strengthens the relationship. Because then I do agree, like what Coach was saying, that you won't, I think all of you all said that you won't get those distractions, because people will already know, oh yeah, that's not flying over there with them. As opposed to this maneuvering between us, and we have to be as one. And that goes for with your children, your family, with everybody. And that's a hard part for a lot of people, but especially that children piece. But it does apply to them as well. And I go back to my vows quite often because they are specific. People ain't listening. They reciting, but they not listening to what they're saying. It's a reason that you say what you say.
Yeah, some people get their marriage vow from MSU. They make stuff up along the route. And so I do want to touch one real quick before we go into our final thoughts, because the time is upon us. I am serious when I talk about the first attack will always come from within. Like, I don't think we really get it. I know we get, wild in the honeymoon phases of our relationship, but within the honeymoon phase, the thing that really kicks us out of the honeymoon phase is that slick tongue. Like, we have a way, and I say we, I'm talking about everybody. Nobody's exempt. We have a slick way of saying a thing to let a person know that we don't like a thing. Why is that necessary? Like, why do I need to bring my childish behavior to an adult arena? Like, that slick tongue will get you in trouble all the time, especially if you are connected with a person who catches it and their tongue is just as slick or even slicker, right? So we gotta be careful, man. It's like, why do it? Why even run the risk of doing that when harmony is available? And that's the thing I like to say. Harmony is available. Why choose discord? And when you pay attention, there's so many things that's trying to get you comfortable in discord. Like, only thing you got to do is click the like button. I'm talking to everybody who's listening right now. All you got to do is click the like button. Click it, right? But here's the deal. It doesn't matter what the platform is talking about. All you got to do is click the like button. Well, if they're talking about some of the most outlandish and ridiculous thing on the planet, all you got to do is click the like button. So you're desensitized to like. And so that becomes one of the issues when it comes down to relationship. You're desensitized. Only thing you need to know is that the other person wants you to like it, therefore I must like it. No, that's not 100% true. Like it because you actually like it, because it desensitizes you from liking. But here's the other side of it as well. Well, we're in a world to where we believe that like equals love. So if you don't like me, I believe you don't love me. Like and love is not the same thing. Houdini told y'all that years ago. If you don't know the song, just go back through your 1980s repertoire and you'll figure it out, right? The words love and like both have 4 letters, but they're 2 different things altogether. That's what they said. And they're absolutely right. And we've confused it that like equals love and vice versa. It does not. I can love you and dislike you very much right now. Give time. I get back to liking you. But right now, I need you to create space and get away from me, because if you stay close right now, this slick tongue going to come out because I don't like you right now. So listen, I just wanted to say that piece. I greatly appreciate what everybody said, not just on the panel, but what the value that you guys added in the chat as well. Greatly appreciate you guys. I hope this conversation was value added. Like I said, it was going to be a little different. But I hope it was value. So let's kind of, give their final thoughts. We're going to start with Dr. Lisa, if you don't mind, and then we'll just go to Nadella, and then the voice of reason, and then we'll end the show for myself. So, all right. Good. Everybody good to go? All right, Dr. Lisa, you have the floor.
Well, my final thoughts are that I enjoyed this conversation. I enjoy them all. This specifically because I think we need more of these kind of conversations. I personally feel like marriage is under attack and we got some work to do. So I encourage this kind of conversation over and over and over again. This actually helps me. And I think that the more we put the work in and the more we value our relationships, not just marriage, but just relationships in general, and do the work, the better we will be as people and the better and stronger our relationships will be. So thank you for the opportunity to even have this conversation. I want to do it again. So let me know when y'all ready to do this part 2, part 3, part 4. But I think this is something that we should continue to pour even into, especially into our young couples who are getting together, understanding what marriage truly is. And I loved what Sister Nodella shared about a covenant versus marriage and how they're different, the same. That would be a great conversation. So I look forward to the next one. Have a great weekend.
So I love, first of all, our topic is unpacking the marriage and how can we learn to thrive together. I want us to understand that first and foremost, when the marital covenant was created, it was created with every intent that it was to be successful for those who enter the marital covenant. One of the things we must also understand is the role that each of us play within this covenant. No role is greater than the other, although the man's role does have greater responsibility than the woman's role. Nevertheless, both roles, they come together to make the covenant what it is, as well as in creating that place of harmony and also the ability for it to thrive. When we understand God's full purpose and intention for the marital covenant, a lot of the things that we've been dealing with throughout pretty much humanity, but more currently in today's society, we will be able to better navigate through those pitfalls, those traps that are set up by comparing ourselves with other marriages, by wanting our marriages to be like others. And I want us to recognize that God has called each of us to have our own individual, specific, or specialized marriage. And when we learn to operate within the confines of what he's called for us to do as a couple, what other people are doing will be of no consequence to us. Yes, we can applaud what they're doing, but never focus more on what other couples are doing, causing you to forsake and neglect your own marriage. Marriage is a beautiful thing. The scripture says that marriage is honorable and the bed undefiled. And I want us to understand that regardless of what the divorce rate is today, it does not mean that you need to focus on that. Focusing on what you're supposed to be doing in your marriage will only further fortify and foster an environment and opportunities for your marriage to be more successful and to be an example in a world where marriages, unfortunately, are not as successful. So stay focused on the true purpose and meaning for what marriage is. And I trust me, you both will thrive.
Sorry, have my mic on mute. I really truly enjoyed the conversation, and I think just going through and preparing for this podcast, it helps you to identify and think of how you truly. The name of this podcast is reframing the images of relationships, right? And so when we begin to identify that something that we're doing may not be working, and we go and we do that research and that development, and we begin to look into it and to change it, it can be successful even if you're married, you're single, thinking about getting married. These are concepts or something that you can adopt now. So you don't have to wait. You can incorporate them now. If you need someone to, to help you understand those, maybe speak to someone who's a professional, or sit down with each other and come together and figure it out, and plot a course for a plan for yourselves. I think that's important. No matter what stage you're in, that it's important that you identify where you want to go, how you want to move forward. And that can happen even if you're married right now. It does not have to, you don't have to be just entering into marriage or thinking about marriage. So I would implore everyone who wants to continue to grow in their relationship, and they want to reframe it and rethink it because maybe something may not be working, to consider what something that's been said here today. And I pray for each and every relationship that is there, anybody who is listening. I pray for your strength in your relationship. And I pray that something that we said today can help you to consider and maybe change some things that you're doing now, if necessary. Thank you again. And that's all I had to say.
Well, there's no need for me to get center stage because y'all done gave the benediction 3 times. Listen, we greatly appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. Not just on the panel, but also in the chat. Greatly appreciate the comments that you guys were adding in conjunction with the conversation that we were having. And trust me when I tell you that you guys are a functional part of every show. So that being said, you guys continue to continue to be blessed, continue to thrive, and focus on the things that are godly, not the things that are worldly, and believe that relationships are good. Believe that they're good. Don't focus on the numbers. Don't focus on the divorce being at an all-time high, like you just heard. Like, focus on relationships in the hope of what the Father has already promised. And I think what you will find is that you can have a progressive relationship using some of the research and development things that we talked about, using some of these other techniques. And trust me, we didn't even go over all of them. I think we may have touched 2. But again, using those things to continue to propel your relationship forward. So that being said, on behalf of these young ladies and myself, we hope that you have a awesome rest of your day, and that the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else.